She smiled at him over breakfast. Just like every morning, gentle, caring, as if he were still the man she'd once fallen in love with. Coffee, hot, eggs, crispy at the edges, newspaper, neatly folded on his side of the table. Everything as usual. But today, she didn't add sugar to his coffee. He didn't notice. Not the taste, not the smell. He simply took a sip, nodded his thanks, and left for work as always, briefcase in his left hand, phone in his right. She watched from the window until his car disappeared around the corner. Only then did her smile fade. In the kitchen, silence fell. Only the ticking clock and the rustle of wind outside. She walked slowly to the sink, poured the remaining coffee down the drain, and scrubbed the cup meticulously. Then she took a small vial of clear liquid from the cabinet and tucked it back behind a stack of old receipts and expired coupons, where it would never be found. She wasn't planning to kill him. She was planning to destroy his reputation. Their marriage had lasted 17 years. 17 years of lies, pretense, and a growing chasm between the man he was in public and the man he became at home. James, his name was James, was a respected attorney in a small western town. Quoted in the local paper, invited to charity galas, his children attended good schools, and his wife, Margaret, always looked impeccable. Neat hair, subtle makeup, a soft voice, and a restrained smile. No one knew he locked her out of their bedroom every night. No one knew he'd stopped saying her name 5 years ago. No one knew he secretly transferred money to his assistant, a young, ambitious woman named Emily, who looked at him as if he were a god. Margaret knew everything. She knew even more than he thought. She knew when he lied. She knew where he'd been. She knew exactly how many times he'd betrayed her, not just with his body, but with his soul. He didn't just cheat. He eroded her, drop by drop, word by word, glance by glance. But she stayed silent. Because of the children. Because of appearances. Because she believed once that he'd come to his senses. She was wrong. She took her first step toward revenge 3 months ago. She enrolled in a digital security course. Not because she feared for her data, but because she feared he'd start covering his tracks. And she wanted those tracks to remain. Forever. She learned to hack his email, his cloud storage, his bank alerts. She knew when he booked hotel rooms under fake names. She knew what gifts he bought Emily. She knew he was planning to leave, not just leave, but destroy her in the process, accuse her of squandering family funds, strip her of custody, leave her with nothing. He never suspected she could code. That before marriage, she'd worked in an IT firm. That she still had access to old tools capable of tracking his every digital move. She didn't rush. Revenge isn't impulsive. Revenge is art. And she intended to make it her masterpiece. Today's coffee was only the beginning. That same day, while James was in a meeting, she sent an anonymous letter to the State Bar Association. Attached were screenshots of his messages with Emily, discussing how to skirt the law while handling a client's inheritance. Nothing outright criminal, but enough to raise eyebrows. She also sent a copy to his boss. His best friend. And his best friend's wife, a woman who'd always looked down her nose at Margaret. Then she logged into his LinkedIn and sent Emily a message from his account. "I'm tired of pretending. Let's run away. Everything's ready." Emily replied within 20 minutes. "Are you serious?" Margaret replied for him. "Absolutely. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., airport. No luggage. Just you and me." She knew Emily would tell her husband. She knew Emily's husband was a former cop. She knew he wouldn't stay quiet. James came home late. Exhausted, irritated. "What the hell is going on?" he snapped, tossing his briefcase onto the couch. Barrett called. "Says someone leaked my emails. Someone knows about Emily." Margaret looked up at him. Calm. Clear-eyed. "Maybe you told someone yourself?" she asked gently. "Or maybe Emily isn't as discreet as you thought?" He fell silent. Stared at her as if seeing her for the first time in years. "Was it you?" She didn't answer. Just turned back to the stove. He stepped closer, gripped her shoulder. "Did you set this up?" Slowly she turned. There was no fear in her eyes. Only ice. "And if I did?" He released her. Stepped back. For the first time in years, he was afraid. The next day, everything accelerated. Emily didn't show up for work. Her husband filed a police report about a possible abduction by a sexual predator with a detailed description of James. The local paper ran a headline, "Prominent attorney under suspicion in staffer's disappearance." The Bar Association suspended him pending investigation. Clients began revoking power of attorney. Friends stopped returning his calls. At home, the children asked, "Dad, is it true you were going to leave Mom? Dad, did you lie to us all this time?" He denied everything. But the evidence was everywhere, in his own phones, his own email, his own cloud. He thought he'd erased it all. But someone had restored it. Someone knew everything. He began to suspect Margaret. But she had an alibi for every moment. She'd been home, at school events, chatting with neighbors. She'd even recorded a calm, composed video message to her parents, full of sympathy for poor Emily. No one would ever believe she was behind it. A week later, Emily was found. She'd been at her sister's house in another state. She'd run away herself, terrified by the message from James urging her to flee. She thought he'd lost his mind. But by then, James's reputation was already in ruins. He was fired, expelled from the country club. His name whispered behind backs. He came home furious. "You did this," he shouted. "You destroyed me." Margaret sat on the couch, reading a book. She looked up. "I didn't do anything, James. I just waited for you to destroy yourself. You wrote those messages. You met with her. You lied to me, to the kids, to everyone. I just helped the world see the truth." "You're a psychopath," he gasped. "No," she said. "I'm a wife, a mother. And I protected what you tried to break." He left that night, packed a few things, got in his car, and drove away. Where, to her, didn't matter. And she didn't care. The next morning, she filed for divorce. A month later, the court granted her full custody and the majority of their assets, including the house. James didn't contest it. He had no strength, no resources, no will left. She felt no joy, no relief. Only peace. The kind of peace that comes after a long storm. After years of silence, endurance, pretense for others. Until one day, you decide, enough. A year passed. The children grew calmer, smiled more, stopped asking about him. She took a job as a cybersecurity consultant under a different name, but with the same skills. Worked from home. Lived quietly. Sometimes, in the evenings, she'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea and watch the sunset. Sometimes, she'd remember that morning when she added something other than sugar to his coffee. She didn't regret it. Not because she loved revenge, but because revenge was the last way to reclaim her self-respect. One day, a letter arrived. From James. He wrote from another state. Working as a warehouse laborer. Living in a friend's spare room. Begging for forgiveness. Saying he finally understood what he'd lost. That Emily had dumped him a week after their escape. That he was left with nothing. She read the letter, then calmly deleted it. She didn't reply, because forgiveness is a gift. And he didn't deserve one. Revenge isn't always a scream. Sometimes it's silence. The silence of a woman who smiles over breakfast, while her husband drinks his coffee, unaware his life has already ended, and hers has just begun.